right, everyone. Um, Given enough time now, I think. So let's go ahead and get started with the webinar. Again, thank you to everyone for signing up and showing up today. Today we're going to be talking about accelerating Zendesk support and guide configuration management. First off, hi there. My name is Kirk Debates. I'm a customer engineer here at Salto. Uh, Part of my responsibilities are, occur before the sale, making sure that Salto is going to be a good fit and that we're going to be able to solve your problems, and also in post sales where I help customers onboard onto the platform. I'm based out of Tampa, Florida, and I'm glad to be here with you guys today. Intelligent customer experience. That's kind of what Zendesk is all about. Um, Making sure that your collaboration automation actually leads to high value in your customer interactions. And to get the best in class operations, that is sometimes a long and winding road, but we're here to help you get there. Now, there are a few things that are going to get in your way with that. And just having polled a lot of our customers, what we found is basically about four things that are going to stand in your way. And then, of course, we also have ways to resolve that. Kind of first and foremost, the thing that we see the most of is technical debt. Um, you know, there's everybody always wants stuff really quickly, get stuff built, and after a while, it's just no longer in use. It just kind of sits out there. Um, and how we can help you with that, basically getting rid of it and understanding how you can get rid of, how you can either move stuff faster along or get rid of the old stuff, is understanding and documenting where the configurations are actually being used. And we'll look at how we do that during the demo as well as reviewing and getting visibility into when the new configurations are actually added, so you guys can avoid duplicate work. Another common problem that we see are too many admins. And the way that we can often help out with this is everyone needs to have admin access, according to most all of our customers. Everyone believes they need that. The problem is the risk of making those changes live in production with all those admins out there. It's just a little bit too dangerous. So what we've seen a lot of our customers do is, by having your sandboxes aligned, you can have all of those admins and have them in sandbox, and then you're able to quickly move that stuff over to production. And I'll show you how to do that as well. There's also the problem with a lack of knowledge transfer. How often do you have, that one guy who's built so much of this stuff, and nobody really understands how it works and how everything is connected? We're here to help you document those changes as they're made in production, as well as show you how everything is connected, like a where is this used type of ordeal. And kind of finally, the manual work limits. The manual work limits agility. And that's, as you guys know, when you're working in your sandbox, if you don't have Salto, you have to then manually recreate all of that work in your production environment. By having Salto out there, it's going to allow you to make that change management process easier, simpler. It also is going to give you regularly scheduled configuration backups. Remember, in that poll, we talked about how quickly can you revert a production change. You're going to need backups to be able to do that. And then we also allow you to review similar configurations and then integrate those duplicate configurations, when it's possible. So why should you care? Well, if you're agile and making changes in production, or you have too much tech debt, or you've got a lot of that manual change management, we can help you fix that by reducing the risk and saving resources so that you don't have to make those changes in production. Or if you do, you have the ability to revert them. If you've got too much tech debt, The amount of time that we're going to free up is going to increase the agility and improve your framework. And then, of course, for the manual change management, um, you're going to be able to um, focus on what matters because you're not going to be just constantly, copy it from here, do it there, or just making all those changes directly in production. So hopefully that's kind of why you guys signed up for the webinar. And now I will take you into the demo itself. So just so you know, I've got a couple of different Zendesk instances here that I'll be referring to, and we'll be bouncing back and forth between them and Salto. This is the Salto interface. Everything starts with a fetch. This is where we go out and we connect to the API endpoints for Zendesk and pull in all of the configuration metadata. It's important to note that it is just the metadata. We're not pulling in any of your tickets or anything along those lines. That's considered data, and we don't touch that information, just the structure around it. So as we pull in that metadata, what we do is we convert it to a file format that we call NACL. That just stands for not another configuration language. It's very text-based, and it allows us to do analysis on the underlying objects. Allows us to then turn around and build dependency trees so that we can, and then we turn around and present that back to you here in this, like I said, this dependency tree. This is where you're going to find everything that you would expect to see in Zendesk, whether that's your automations, your brands. Obviously we have guide. It's the subject of today's, one of the subjects of today's webinar. Your macros, triggers, as well as the settings. We also have the ability to monitor the settings so that we can understand what's going on. I like to start with macros when we start talking about impact analysis, mostly because they're connected to a lot of things. So when we go down here and look at my, this is my access request macro. If I want to go see this in Zendesk, it's easy enough just to open it up. You can see it in our nice familiar user interface. But like I said, this is our representation of it. So everything that was included in Zendesk is over here, including all of the actions and everything that it needs to take. More importantly, what we see are the dependencies. So this macro, we can see, depends on three things. Depends on a ticket field, a tag, and one of the ticket field custom options that you can see out there. Now, when you're navigating through Salto, anytime you see this purple with the black underline, that means it's navigable and can take us over to the next piece. Okay, this macro is connected to this ticket field. Okay, that's interesting. This is all the information about the ticket field, but what is that ticket field connected to? Well, this is used by four things. It's used by that macro, an SLA policy, and a couple of triggers. It also has a couple of children, the actual custom options that are part of that. And that allows us to, make decisions on, is it safe to make changes to this? This particular ticket field is used by four things, so we need to understand that impact. Versus this macro is not used by anything else, which makes sense. It's the top of the chain. So it's probably safer to make changes to this macro than it is to this ticket field, just from an impact perspective. So like I said, this allows us to fully go out and engage and understand, hey, I'm thinking about making this change. What does, if I make this change, what impact is that going to have? And you can totally visualize that by going up and down the chain as you see fit. So you get that benefit of being able to fully understand and document how things are connected to each other. But how we turn around and use that is in our deployment functionality. We label that under the compare and deploy tab, but we actually have more than just compare and deploy. Compare and deploy is the functionality that we have that is most frequently used, but we have several different mechanisms for doing deployments in Zendesk. Like I said, we can do the compare and deploy, which is kind of the traditional and most used way. The find environment changes and deploy, that allows us to time box things. This comparison is going to tell us all of the differences that are happening between the two environments. The find environment changes allows us to time box that. So if we know that we've just been working on stuff over the last 3 weeks on this major project, we can just come in here, tell it to look at the last 3 weeks, and just give us those changes that have occurred. Of course, we allow you to edit an environment directly if you're comfortable using Salto for that versus going directly into Zendesk. And then kind of a little bit of the secret sauce is the ability to roll back to a previous version. We see that, we'll talk about this as we start talking about changes and how to back those out. This is one of the mechanisms that we have to do that. We also see it often used after a Zendesk sandbox refresh. When Zendesk refreshes your sandbox for you, it wipes out all of the existing work that was in flight. By having this ability to roll back to a previous version, we can go back to the last fetch that happened right before the Zendesk refresh and bring in all of that work so we don't lose any work during that refresh process. But as I said, the compare and deploy is the one that gets used most, so I will start there. And for this one, we're going to move from the sandbox to my production environment. And since we were just looking at that macro, let's deploy that macro. And we start everything off with a compare and deploy. This is a 3-step process. The first thing that we do is we look at what all of the changes are. So the way that you read this is to make production look like sandbox, I have 799 total changes. 138 of those are additions, meaning they're in the sandbox but not in production. 327 would be deletions, meaning they're in production but not in the sandbox. And then 84 modifications, meaning they're in both, but there's something different about them. If you want to see what those differences are, all you have to do is click on the line, and it's going to bring a comparison out here. This is our default mechanism for doing this as far as the element view. And here you can see that it has highlighted that it's going to need to change the wording here in the brand URL. And we can navigate down to the next location where the subdomain also has to be different. It's the Zendesk restrictions, and it's one of those things that we happen to know about. So no big deal there. We won't actually deploy these changes. We do have a couple of different ways of looking at it. I actually prefer the changes view because it grays out everything that is not part of, that's not different. So if it's the same, why do I need it in my screen? And then for those people who are more text or code oriented, we have the ability to look at the NACL file. And this is what a NACL file looks like underneath the covers. And this is just the, a side-by-side comparison that allows us to understand what changes or what's different between the two. For now, I'm going to go back to our default of the element view. And of course, we can dismiss this because our purpose today was to look at deploy that macro. So when I go and look at my macro for that filter, I can easily navigate directly down here. And you'll notice that it immediately pulled up that I have 3 dependencies that are required. We've got a couple of different ways to go about looking at these. First, of course, is just by drilling into it. And we can see here, no surprises, we have the ticket field, the tag, and that custom option that was also needed. And of course, you can just go ahead and select stuff here and it'll be added to your selection. What I find most of my customers doing though, is that they're not just working on a single macro and then deploying it. What they're doing is selecting all of the things that they've been working on for the past couple of days or weeks or whatever. And then they'll come over to this missing dependencies tab. And this is where they can add the additional things that are technically required to do the deployment, but they either didn't know, hey, this needs to get moved, or they just forgot about it. And this is a great way to come in here and add everything that's necessary. We'll do that just by selecting them. And once we have this down to 0 missing dependencies, that means we have a technically complete package, meaning that you should be successful deploying everything. We're also going to bubble up these other dependencies. These are elements that reference something that's in your selected package, and there may be business reasons to take them along with everything else that you've already selected. There's no technical reason. Your deployment should be successful as it's selected, but like I said, there may be a business reason. For instance, these two triggers may need to go with with the actual checkboxes that we already selected. In this particular case, I know that we don't need them, so I'm just going to leave them behind because I'm happy with my 5 selected elements. The next step in the process after we've compared it is we preview the deployment. So a few things go on during the deployment preview. First thing is we're putting things in the right order. We know that macro depends on the ticket field, so the ticket field has to go in first. The next thing we're doing is we're letting you guys take advantage of all of our experience deploying other Zendesk elements for our customers. If they have found any kind of problems in the past, we're going to write what we call a change validator. It's actually just a check to make sure that your deployment doesn't contain the types of problems that are the types of issues that could cause you a problem in the deployment. If there is anything that is fatal and can't be deployed, they'll show up here on this will not be deployed tab. Anytime something shows up over there, we'll tell you why we can't deploy it and usually how to fix it. If it is just something that you need a warning about, then it's going to show up over here in the issues column as well as this deployment issues tab. I find it easier to work on the issues column personally, but we don't have any of those for this particular deployment. So if I'm happy with it, and I am, because we don't have anything that's causing conflicts as far as will not be deployed or the deployment issues, I can then go over and deploy this. I'm getting that final pop-up because I've identified this production instance as a sensitive environment. So it's just one last check to make sure that that's really where you want to deploy stuff. And the Zendesk API is pretty quick, so the deployments go relatively quickly. And we can see here everything was successfully deployed. If we'd had a failure, we would have identified, hey, this element failed to deploy, as well as the deployment issues that accompanied that. So any errors that came back from the Zendesk API call, we're going to put in there. And if it's something that we understand how you might mitigate that problem, we'll give you advice on that there as well. And then finally, because we know the order of things that need to get deployed, if, for instance, that ticket field hadn't gone in successfully, then the macro would have shown up here on warrant attempted. It doesn't make sense to try to deploy something if we know that it's going to fail. A couple of other things that have also gone on. We have the ability to integrate with your Git provider. It's certainly not required, but it is a nice additional bonus. By connecting it, in this case, it's over on GitHub, but we also support any Git providers. The ones that we see most common are GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, and of course GitHub. And if you want to see that, then it's just a matter of going over and looking. And these are all of the NACL files that were just deployed. So we have not just a backup here inside Salto, but an external one that is entirely under your control. So let's see. The other thing that I wanted to show you was we're not restricted to just going from sandbox to production. For instance, in my guide section, I have in my production environment, I have this article that I created for the webinar. It's just got just some text and an image that's over here. But we can see that it's not over here in my sandbox environment. And that's fine, because all we have to do is come up and do another compare and deploy. And this time, we're going to go from production back to sandbox. And we're going to deploy the article in this condition. So before I added a filter just by here, if we know what the name of it is, we can always just type that in and it will take us directly there. And we can see down here, we have that article for the webinar, and I'll just select that. And you can see that it grabbed, by selecting that top level one, it grabbed everything that I was going to need, whether it's the actual text of the article and the translations, or as well as the attachment. But we also have, the required dependencies, and these are all filled. So we have a technically complete package. And if we look at the other dependencies, we'll need to clear the filter. We can see that the brand is also impacted, as well as the guide brands. We want to see what those impacts are. Because this is part of the Salto brand, we'll see any changes that are out there. Again, these are not required to go over, so you do want to inspect them just to make sure that there's not something that you want to bring. But in general, it's like I said, they are not required. So I'm pretty happy with my package here. So now it's just, again, a matter of previewing that deployment. We're just putting things in the right order and checking for other issues that we might know about. And here we have that example of the deployment issue. We didn't specify the order, which was one of the things that we could have picked from the selection criteria, but I didn't wanted to actually have something to show you here. So this is our warning thing. It's not going to prevent us from deploying. It's just not necessarily going to put it in the order that you expected it to. And we can go ahead and just deploy that. So there tends to be, because the articles tend to be a little bit larger, it takes slightly longer to do those deployments versus the metadata deployments that you saw me do with the macro. And that, excuse me, but that still comes over here pretty quick. And now we can see that we're doing that push over to GitHub as well. We go over to our target environment and refresh the page. We now see that we have that article for the webinar, and it looks exactly the same as the one in production. So again, doesn't matter which direction we go. We give you a nice interface to be able to go ahead and migrate stuff, whether that's inside guide or if it is, your traditional metadata from Zendesk Support. One of the last things I wanted to talk to you about was actually working with themes. So in addition to the articles that we've already looked at and the metadata, we can actually still work on the themes. And this is true whether it's one of the themes that are provided by Zendesk, which is what I'm going to use today, or if it's a third-party theme that you've purchased the developer's license for. We have the ability to push those customizations over as well. So I'm going to go ahead and customize, and I'm just going to, let's take a look at the SRD FAQs, and I'm just going to change my text color from black to red. Nice, easy change, good for demos. And we can see that everything is red over here. I'm going to publish this change. And what I have to do then in Salto is, since I made that change in my sandbox, I'm going to need to do a manual fetch this time. Something I didn't mention earlier, but you guys need to be aware of. We have the ability to schedule those fetches either weekly, daily, or hourly, whatever best fits your your change schedule, I guess would be the best way to put it. And just remember that every time that we do a fetch, we're basically creating a save point so that you can turn around and as we finish with this deployment, we will, we'll give you the ability to revert that and restore and go back to a previous thing. So now that now that my fetch is done, if I do my new compare and deploy, and this time I'm going to go back the other direction from sandbox to production. And this time I'm going to deploy Copenhagen theme changes. We'll do that, compare and deploy. And since we know we're looking for the stuff in Copenhagen, we can just go look for it. And that was my Salto one. And we can see here that this is just going to be a change. So let's inspect that change. And we can see here that as we scroll down, we can see that the value changed. The value that we're seeing in production is this hash 4F, whatever. And we have a different RGB value in Sandbox, and that's what we're going to want to deploy. So from here, I can just select that. I have no dependencies of either type, so it's okay to just deploy this one. Go ahead and preview that deployment. No order to put things into, so but there may be more checks for themes, so it all kind of balances things out. And these changes don't just have to be the configuration changes that I did as the example. What they can also be to the actual raw JavaScript files or CSS files that underpin the changes. We can move those just as well. Here we have that same summary screen. We have no issues, so it's okay to just go ahead and deploy this. So if we deploy it, that will go out. Make that change. And then we'll be finished. Okay, so now if we go over to our production environment, go over to the theme, and we can see that now the colors, the text color is red over here as well. And you can see the community and knuckles and all that. So that allows us to, like I said, move all of the theme information in any direction. But like I said, this is red, which may not be something that you want to see on your in your production environment, especially out there in Guide. So clearly management is going to be screaming about this. We don't want red out there. So we've got a couple of different ways that we can deal with that. From the actual deployment screen, we can choose to revert the deployment. If if the decision is made after you've already left the screen, we can go over to the history tab and we can select to revert that as well. Or if for some reason the change was made outside of Salto, this is where you could potentially use that roll back to a previous version. So what I'm going to go do is I know that change wasn't in there at 5:58 this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and create my deployment based off of that. Now, an important distinction here is the revert takes everything that was part of that deployment and puts it back to the way it was prior to the deployment. Using the restore capabilities, this is where we get to pick and choose what it is that we're going to be making the modifications to. So in this particular case, I know that was a modification, so it's just easier to find it just on that tab. And then I'm just going to go ahead and expand everything out, and we can see my Copenhagen theme. We're going to change it from the way it currently is with that RGBA number back to the 2F that it was before. So again, I'll just select it from here. I don't anticipate any missing dependencies. You can see that other things have changed in my environment since this morning. So that means that I've got people on my team who are showing this to other customers as well. Um, we can go ahead and preview that deployment. Exact same thing happens here as when you're going in versus coming out. We go through the same steps. We still have to preview the deployment, make sure there are no issues that we know about, just to make sure that it's safe. It's all about being able to do this quickly and efficiently. And if you're not doing it safely, then it doesn't matter how quick it is. But once we have everything here, we can do that deployment again. And when this deployment finishes, we should be able to go back to our production environment and see that the lettering change back to black. Everything was successful here. So that means we can go over here. And if we refresh this, of course, the page is not found. We will have to go back in the customize, and we can see, well, we can already see that community is back to black. The text color is now also back to black. And since we were looking at the Knuckles page, everything is back to black here as well. So you have the ability to make those changes, be confident that you can roll them back in case any problems occur, and and basically just take better control of your environments. Now, one of the things that we see a lot of especially in Zendesk environments, are what we call citizen developers. These are kind of your exceptional users who have been granted admin access because they need something that's, they need admin over something that's specific to their group. But the way that Zendesk's permission scheme works, it allows them access to way more stuff. To be able to keep track of what those developers may be doing, we give you the ability to monitor those changes. And this is just a matter of giving it a label. So I'm going to catch my citizen developers, and I can't type today for some reason. And then we just pick what it is that we care about. We can get super granular. So if we only care about people who are deleting stuff, we can do that. Same thing's true with additions and modifications. I'm going to stay with any change for this. Then we just need to tell it what it is that we care about. And some of my customers, they care about everything. So they just select everything for Zendesk. But you can, again, get hyper granular here as well. For instance, if you only care about the trigger order changing, because that that definitely impacts how Zendesk behaves, you can just care about that. Or like I said, you can select everything. And that way, any change that occurs, every time that a fetch happens, we are going to compare that to, hey, are we supposed to be monitoring this? And if we are, we're going to notify you either by email or by Slack. Now, to kind of help cut down on the noise, we give you several different ways that you can care about the deployments. By default, it's whether it was made in Zendesk directly or through our deployments. But you can also, what I see very frequently within my customers at least, is they're only monitoring the stuff that is done in Zendesk directly. They already have a record of things that are occurring in Salto. So they only care about people who are making manual changes. And then that will send the send the notification to them, again, after each fetch, if it falls in the scope of what has been selected. So that's how we're going to be able to help you. Leor, do we have anything in the question and answer or chat? I'm not sure which one we're using for this. Hearing nothing, I will go ahead and then just kind of finish out with the slideshow. We'll finish that up with a second poll. So if we can get that out there, this is just kind of grading me, I guess, is the best way to put it. Is this something that you guys might be, did I do a good job? Did you get the information that you were hoping to get out of the webinar? Stuff along those lines. And while that poll is running, I will go ahead and just kind of let you know that you are in good company if you decide to move forward with Salto. We've got all sizes and shapes of companies that are out there using Salto. By the way, we're not just Zendesk focused. We do handle several other applications like Salesforce, NetSuite, Okta, and Jira. And then yeah, so some of these customers are not just Zendesk customers. And yeah, so just want to say thank you. Let's see. Well, we've got one chat. Let's see what we got over here. Oh, just thank you, Kirk. Well, thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We are at salto.io, and we're happy to chat with you. Well, we just had a question pop in right there at the end. Your product is great. Zendesk has added a trigger deployment feature. Are you concerned that they will continue to add natively? As a company, we are not concerned about that. We work very closely with Zendesk. We're one of their partners. We understand where their development process is. Right now, the only functionality that they're building natively is the ability to go from the sandbox to production. As you saw, we can go both directions. So yeah, we encourage them to kind of make this functionality, build it out, continue to build it out more natively. But yeah, we're happy with the way that we sit in the market. Alrighty. I don't see any more questions. So for that, I guess I will say thank you. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.